ESC County Board of Education order, and welcome everybody that's here. Want to remind everybody that ESC County schools empower all students to become productive, responsible citizens of an ever-changing global society. I take a motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, the published agenda did not have 7D.
D.
D. The agenda in your packet and there does have, so we will be approving an amended agenda to include 7D, discuss and or approve Opera Iowa contract.
So moved.
Second?
A motion and a second to approve the amended agenda as stated. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passed. Okay, so we'll go on to the consent items.
Okay. Any questions on the minutes from July 28th? Then you have the financial statements. And a few bills. We did pretty good getting caught up on bills in July. And had registration and stuff in the 1st of August, so we may have a few extra bills next month, but not a lot of bills this month, only about 90,000.
We still like to see a $90,000.
Every once in a while it doesn't hurt, right? So I did not have a lot of notes as I was going through there. The Star Energy bill for fuel, that's all for the transportation fleet. And I think Phil went ahead and locked in propane for the entire year.
And what was that?
$1.49.
Yeah.
49 or 47, I think 49. So no more surprises like we had last spring with that deal for us. Other than that, the real big bill was to Carroll Control Systems, and we had about $14,000 worth of work done to the middle school boiler. And I'm not a boiler expert, but the tubes needed redone. So that was like 13.7 or 13.9. And then we bought a couple portable air conditioners, primarily for the band room in the middle school, although we'll be able to use them other places because they are movable. But that's about our only classroom, one of 2 classrooms that I can think of that doesn't have a window, so we can't get any air. So
Is that in that 19,225?
it's in there, yeah. Yeah, and so it's something's been talked about doing something there for a number of years, and we finally went this route. So. Anything you guys have on the financials or the bills?
John, can you talk just a little bit about the operating fund between June and July, the
Yeah.
$600,000?
In July and August, basically schools have no revenue stream. I mean, you get a little bit of taxes, and you might have some bills still trickling in from open enrollment or special ed, but no state aid, no big tax payments. So July and August are pretty skinny, so you try to build up a balance through June 30th that you can live with for a couple, 75 days or so. So you see the balance goes from 1.6 to right at $1 million, and it's a little better than it was a year ago.
Better than it was last year, that's a good thing.
So that's what's going on there.
When we are getting our state aid payment, how much is that?
$500,000 roughly a month, and it comes over 10 months.
So right there, we get it.
Yeah. All right. Oh, I guess one other thing on there was a bus for $12,000. And what we did there was,
We talked about.
when we had a bus accident last spring, and we had to lease a bus. The insurance company paid for the lease, it was about $8,000. And Phil felt like that bus that we were leasing was better than a couple that we had in our fleet. So we negotiated with the bus company, and they took the, it was actually a $30,000 bus. They took the $8,000 lease off, and then gave us $10,000 for one of our buses. So we were able to upgrade to a bus that Phil thought was a better unit.
Couple years newer one.
It is a little newer and had about 60 or 80,000 less miles. So,
And it wasn't wrecked.
and it hasn't been wrecked.
I got all that.
For about
That
$12,000.
sounds good to me.
And so we did that, and,
So let's do that again next year.
okay.
Well, yeah,
let's-
all, but
let's
not,
not-
yeah, not the wrecking part.
I'll not wreck part.
Take
Yeah.
that out of there.
Anyhow, if that's all, we'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes of financials and the bills on account.
So moved.
Second?
A motion and a second, if there's no other questions, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 3-0. Yeah, we'll just do them all at once today, since we only got 3.
Okay,
That'll be fine.
that's fine. You want me to do that?
No, I think they're fine. We're talking about the bill to Albright Oil, since we only have 3 members, we'll just put them all in one motion tonight. So we'll get back to the regular process next month.
We have to do that yet, right? Or did we do that already?
We're done.
Oh,
All right, you ready for reports?
okay, my
Sorry,
fault.
sorry.
Come on, Chris, get up here.
Sorry. Okay, we'll move on to reports. Barb, go ahead.
Yep, I've got 2 or 3 things. In your packet, toward the back of your packet are 4 pages of documents. And the title on the top left-hand side is called 2013-14 AYP notification. Those 4 pages represent information that comes from the Department of Education every year at this time. And I'm sure if asked, you probably remember that one of the things that happens is that in the state of Iowa, our particular plan happens to be that the Department of Ed looks at how schools do annually in reading and mathematics, and then there's some other criteria that they look at in addition to reading and math, but those are the 2 content areas that they look at. And the first page that you have in your packet is labeled ESAC County School District, and it's looking at the district as a whole. The district met the participation rates, and by that, it doesn't mean we're kids absent today, we gave the test and they made the test up. What it means is that our students that are in special education and have IEP plans, that those students who should be taking the test took it, and some kids have disabilities that don't allow them to take the test, and we don't have to give that test to them. So we didn't break any rules or any guidelines there. So it's saying we tested the right kids, according to what the law in the state of Iowa is. The annual measurable objective over on the right-hand side then on that page is saying, did the district meet the reading goals and the mathematics goals that the state of Iowa has set for us? Not that we set for ourselves, but that the state of Iowa sets for us. It's called a trajectory. So if you were on a piece of graph paper and you look at this pen that I'm holding right here, there's a trajectory by which districts must follow. In other words, every year we need to improve. A higher percentage of kids need to be proficient on either ITBS and kindergarten through 8th grade, or first grade through 8th grade, excuse me. And then at the high school level, it's on their ITEP. Okay, all of those are called Iowa tests. So they're all from the Iowa Tests of Educational Development Center. Okay, first grade through 8th grade take ITBS. High school kids take ITET tests. So it says, as a district, we met reading and we met math. And then if they have other academic indicators, that very bottom line of that little chart, we met those as well. And then for all of the acronyms in these documents, the definitions are below on each page. If you flip to the second page, the chart is labeled ESAC County High School. We met participation rates in reading and mathematics. We met the other academic indicators, but we are now on what's called a watch list for reading and for math. So it's the first year that we did not meet the trajectory. And the trajectory over time, in about 3 years, is to get schools to 100%. Every student in the high school in 11th grade, this measures 11th grade. Okay? Every 11th grade student would be proficient on ITEDs in reading and in math. Math is pretty straightforward. It's a test, a mathematics test. Reading has 2 places in the high school that it gets its score. It gets it from a reading test, just a flat-out reading test that has a time period to it. So it's a 1-hour reading test or a 15-minute reading test. But the second place the reading score comes from is the social studies test that students take in high school. And that test has significant amounts of reading in it, and that score then contributes to the reading score. So when you take the social studies test, you get a social studies score from it about the content of social studies, but part of your reading score as a student also comes from that test. So when we're on a watch list, what it means is that we did not have enough students that were proficient to meet that state goal in reading and in math. Now, you might ask me questions like, so how many other schools in the high school were just added? I knew Brent was gonna wanna know
That's a
that.
good question.
And I don't have an answer for that. Because from the time we got this until now, honestly, I just have not had the time to look. But there is a website that I can go to, and I'll bring that back next time, but it will be to tell you, so in total, how many schools in the high school levels are on the watch list, how many schools were added this year, how many schools got off because they were on it in prior years, how many schools are not only on the watch list, but even in a more severe status than that, meaning they've been on the watch list for several years. This afternoon, Mr. Litter and I met with the 3 high school math teachers, and we've started to develop a plan about what we're gonna look at and develop a plan to work between now and November, because November is when the students take the test again in the high school. That will not be the only time that we work on looking at the data and making change, but we're gonna develop plans for improvement and then measure those plans before we ever take the test a year from this November. So it's not like getting ready for the test this November. It's really looking to say, you know what's not happening that needs to be happening, who's the group of kids that it's not happening with, and trying to determine what we need to do to make that adjustment. In the reading, it's a little bit different because we're gonna approach it by looking at all the content areas. Because there's reading in mathematics, there's reading in science, there's reading in social studies, there's reading in animal science class and ag. And so it's gonna be a building-wide approach to look at reading, which probably was a little overdue, that we would do that. And we have some expertise to be able to get at that too. We actually think we can make a bigger difference in reading right away than we probably can in math, because we have more ways to attack reading. But this, again, will not be just a plan for November. It's a plan that will be ongoing, and we knew that we were gonna be on the watch list sometime. We didn't know when.
Well, then, that adds to one of my questions, all of those questions that you asked were good questions, but my question would be, what is the percentage that we were supposed to meet that we didn't? Or is there such a thing?
Yes, there is, and I would like to say it's around the 80% of the kids, or 83% of the kids being proficient, somewhere around that range.
Yeah.
So, and remember in high school, all 9th, 10th, and 11th graders take ITEDs, but the only scores that are looked at for this measurement is just 11th grade. So the current seniors are the students that didn't have enough kids to make the trajectory. This year's juniors will be the first group of kids then that will either put us on a watch list for a second year or will bump themselves back out of that. So, yep. Okay, keep turning the page to the next one, is the middle school. The middle school has been on the watch list for a few years. And both in reading and math, they made the trajectory this year. So middle school made the trajectory, and under that AMO, or annual measurable objective, it says delay 1. And what that means is it delays the status of a watch list. This is the first year. You have to be on delay 2. You have to do that 2 consecutive years, then you get yourself off the watch list. Their trajectory is the same as the middle school, or as the high school, so it's a high enough percentage of kids that it gets increasingly difficult. If you have one kid that just decides that day, I don't really care, or you have 5 kids that decide that on the same day in reading or in math, and we don't know that to be the case. It could just flat out be that they don't have the skills that they need to do well, but it also could be, it might be attitude, I'm not sure. So middle school improved, okay? If we move to the and back to the middle school, they met the participation rate, okay? Both elementaries, the first one is Wall Lake, the second one is Sac. Both elementaries met the participation rates, they met the annual measurable objectives in reading and math, and they also met the other academic indicators. So, good news and bad news. Good news, both elementaries made everything they needed to. Other good news is the middle school has worked itself out of at least the first round of reading and math, and bad news, I guess, is that the high school has some work to do. Any questions?
No, we've talked about this a lot, and we, it's understandable that you have few kids and you can explain that.
And in meeting with the math teachers today, they just sort of took the attitude, honestly, that was really positive about, you know what, there's just no excuse, though. We need to dig in and take a look at this. I don't know, I would think by the September board meeting, I'll have at least some ideas of what those plans look like for reading and for math, just so you can have some idea of what's going on in the building then to make some change. The other thing that's interesting is that as you think about the middle school now meeting those goals, if that happens the second year and they keep rolling kids in the high school, that also helps because we're getting kids with improved skills coming from those other grades. So it's just a matter of we need to look at the information and look at student scores and look at the tests and where kids were making consistently the same mistakes and errors of understanding and move forward. So, okay. At the very end of your packet, at the very last page, I believe, is a document that John put together. And this is the operational sharing information for the 14-15 school year. John, do you want to explain what you've got there and why you've got it there?
Yeah, just to show in May, I think, we approved 2080s with our waiver to share transportation and human resources management. So at that time, we had talked that maybe they would be buying time from us on both of those programs. But actually we waited till Barb came on board July 1st to work through the human resources part. And we've determined that Phil will be down there 1 day a week, and then we'll use one of their gals 1 day a week. We think it may only be a 1-year sharing for that position, but we think we found enough things we could use some help with for a year, that it's a legitimate sharing situation. So you'll see, if you start at the top, transportation, we get the additional weighting of 5 students, which is basically generates $32,000 in revenue, and then they'll reimburse us 20% of Phil's salary, so we'll have a total either savings or revenue increase of $46,000. Then on human resources, we'll generate the $31,895 again, and we'll pay 20% of the salary back to our WEVA of $13,000. And so on that, we'll still have additional revenues of $18,000, and we'll have a little additional help to get some things done. So total then is about $64,000 in the general fund. So that's where we're at on that.
That's good, and we can get to, 22 students? Is that right?
21 day.
21, I think.
I think so.
Yeah, because we were talking 8, and then 5, 5, and 3 is what we had discussed at one meeting. So 21, I think.
So that'll give us something to work towards for next year.
Yep.
Phil's been down there at least once or twice, working with their drivers and some of their staff. And once we got through tonight, we were gonna make arrangements with a human resources person. She'll be working with us on Obamacare, Affordable Care Act, safety regulations for our classified staff, and we'll be working on job descriptions for our classified staff, all 3 of which we can use some help with. Her background is in state auditing, so she's,
Well, that'll be good.
yeah. He said, yeah, I liked the way he said it though. That'll be good.
That's always good to have somebody like that on your side.
She seemed very pleasant when we met with her, and I talked with her superintendent at the end of last week, and we'll get together here in the next couple of weeks. He and I will to just kind of talk through this, as well as any things that they might see in their future, like any retirements they might have, or those sorts of things as well, so. Last thing in the superintendent report would be just an update on where we're at with our transitional kindergarten, and first grade. Transitional kindergarten students will be in this building in Sac City. I actually don't have the last number from Mike. Mike, is it 17?
18.
18, okay, so 18 total. Kindergarten has 28 students enrolled, and we made the decision to use 2 teachers for kindergarten. So Tiffany Freeman, who has already been in kindergarten, will stay in kindergarten, and one of our first grade teachers from this building will be moving to kindergarten. The first grade classroom has 26 students, and we'll have 1 classroom teacher and 1 full-time associate at the present time. And that's where we've left those decisions. First grade, you know, it's really fluid for about the first month of school. About what happens with kids and enrollment and that sort of thing. I think if you talk to our secretaries today, they'd tell you, we don't even have all of our parents registered that we know still live in the district will be bringing kids. The day we start school, not everyone will be registered. There's just some people who don't register till 2 weeks after registration date. Their kids may still be in school, but they haven't registered yet. So our best knowledge right now is 18 in transitional kindergarten, 28 in kindergarten, and 26 in first grade. And the associate for that first grade position is in the list that's in the contracts for this month. Any questions or?
No, I think you guys did a good job on that. I mean,
It may change in the year.
yeah,
I
it
mean,
probably will change.
Yeah, it could. We could also end up with 22 kids in first grade. You just don't know. So this is how we'll start school.
This is the SAC building, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Because this is where there seem to be
Yeah, this is where we have
those
the
numbers that were.
questions back in
Yes, yes.
April. What we were gonna do. Okay. You guys have any questions for Barb? No, thank you, Barb.
Mhm.
So let's move on to number 7, since we don't have any unfinished business, and 6. Discuss and/or approve professional development plan.
I'm going to, I didn't really know that I had this screensaver on here.
Those are
Actually,
some cool pictures.
yeah. There's a couple of things that I want to share with you, and the first is going to be, we actually have 3 professional development plans. We will have one that will be our C4K literacy plan for kindergarten through 4th grade, and we're kind of finishing that up tomorrow morning, because the AEA consultants will be helping out with that, and we're meeting with them tomorrow, as well as a couple of teacher reps, one from each of the elementary buildings. So that will be a plan in literacy for part of the professional development days for elementary teachers. We also have what up until 3 o'clock today was going to be a K-12 math plan, but we've taken the high school math teachers out of that plan because we think, because of the watch list, they need to be working, their efforts need to be in some different places. So we'll have a K-8 math plan. And the middle school math teachers will spend their entire year in professional development and math. The elementary teachers then will have some days that are math focused and some days that are literacy focused, okay? Then we have everyone else that's not covered by what I just described. So it's the non-elementary, non-math except for high school math teachers. And so I just called it the ESAC middle school, high school plan. And those teachers will know who they are, okay? This plan was written a few weeks ago, or even maybe a month or so ago, and actually it fits really nicely, now that I heard Chris read the mission statement of the district, as well as the work that we need to be doing for those trajectories that we've talked about. The plan has some beginnings to it, and basically we've said, our goal is how can we prepare students for their future, preparing the Sac County middle school and high school students for their future, whatever that future might be. If we want students that think critically, apply what they understand to the real world, and solve problems collaboratively, then they have to have experiences, they have to have learning experiences that will let them do that. So when we say, you know, in math, they're doing real world problems. Well, if I'm working out of a workbook, a math workbook, and one of the pages, or out of my math textbook, and one of the pages has me solve some sort of problems, like 40 problems tonight, about groceries at a grocery store, that's not called real world application. That's just a math book where you use grocery stores. You can take the dollars and cents off from it and just make it a regular set of math problems.
Yeah.
So we spent some time last spring, before I was hired by the district, I worked on a day with the high school teachers and some of these middle school teachers about really what the heck should kids be doing in high school? And then also knowing that the one-to-one rollout was coming. That if we're talking about authentic experiences and we want them to do grocery store math, I'll just use that as an example, then we have to do something that's a whole lot more like owning a store or business or dealing with budgets and those sorts of things. So some of what's written right here, if we want students that think critically, they must experience critical thinking in their learning experiences at the middle school and high school. Well, and we'd say elementary as well. If we want students that apply what they understand to the real world, then they've got to have that real world application experience. And doing it out of the math book and doing 40, what kids would just say to you are just 40 problems. They don't see that as being anything to do with a business or a grocery store. It's just 40 math problems if you ask a kid. And you know what, they're right. You know, the book, just put it in the background and it's got shelves of food, okay? If we want students that solve problems collaboratively, then they must have experience with problem solving, collaborating, and collaborative problem solving. So this plan was built on that basis. You might say, so why don't teachers come knowing how to do that? Well, ag teachers do, industrial tech teachers do, business teachers do, art teachers, the health sciences do, our ag teachers do. But if you take the straight core content teacher, that's not the professional background that they have. That's not the training that they have. They don't learn to be a teacher by applying it to the real world. And yet, everything we hear today is kids get out of high school and they can't do real world stuff, okay? So we've built this plan on, actually there's two kind of focus areas blended into one, and we've pushed technology, not only for teachers using technology, but more importantly, these kids have a laptop in their hands now. What the heck are they gonna be doing differently in their classroom because everybody has a laptop? Now we can have some authentic experiences that we could only do before if the teacher had a projector and one computer in the room. So the professional development plan is about classroom practices, instructional strategies, and tech tools. And it's not so important about what those are, at least I don't think it is for you at this point, but it's how we're going to approach this. And it's really important for you to understand this implementation data column right here. We provide tons of professional development for our teachers, but we never really know if they're using it in the classroom. We don't know. We don't study that. We don't collect any data about it. So we're going to be looking at these 5 instructional areas: giving effective feedback, performance tasks, authentic real-world tasks, productive group work, not just group work where turn to your neighbor and talk, but group work where 5 people have some difficult topics and issues that they have to deal with and struggle with and problem solve, just like real people do in their work, just like getting your city council together or getting the church board that I'm on together when we don't have much money. So what the heck are we gonna do? And then not call each other names, you know, in the meantime. What were you saying?
Can say pray.
Pray, yes, that would be thinking strategies in the classroom, and literacy strategies in both the content and the ELA classrooms. And then in each one of those pieces of learning, there are technology tools built in. But here's kind of the crux of it right here. This is the implementation. For each one of these strategies, we call it pedagogy, pedagogical strategies. Teachers have to implement each of those teaching strategies 5 times. And we have a documentation documented, a Google Doc. They have to receive peer feedback on that teaching strategy. So I implemented in my classroom, and Chris is my partner for this strategy. It might be Brent, I might not choose Brent though, now that I think about it. I might choose Lisa for my partner sometime along the line. But what Chris does is he either watches a video I've made of myself implementing the strategy, or he has a prep period that works that he can come in and see me using it in my classroom, and then he gives me feedback about it. So did that do anything to raise the expectations for students? Did he see it the way I saw it? Did it really even make any difference? He might say to me about a tech tool I used, why did you even use it? You could have done that on the board. Why would you have got them all to the computer? And then each one of those strategies has to be, the teacher will receive feedback from their principal on one of those. So of the 5 times I implement it, Kevin would come into my room or Denny would come into my room 1 time when I was using it. So I implement every one 5 times. That's 25 implementations. It's 2 peer feedbacks for each, so that's 10 peer feedbacks, and then the principal sees each one of those once. Here's how they will learn.
What are you hearing from the teachers on this?
They haven't heard this yet.
Oh, they haven't.
I was just gonna ask that, how are they gonna schedule that? I mean,
Well, let me show you how they'll learn, then I'll talk to you about how they'll probably more than likely schedule it. There's a free website. This is a Weebly, so we've set up a website. It's called ESC County PD. So this again is for those middle school, high school teachers who know who they are, okay? And again, preparing students for their future. So here, remember one of the learnings was about effective feedback. Here's their learning. There are 3 parts to this.
Does it really take 1.5 to 2 hours to
Yes,
do this?
it does. Yep. Each one of these has an essential question about what they're going to be learning. Here's the directions, and every one of them has an assignment. See, it says save as a Word document, send to Barracuda. So they'll send assignment, and then they'll get feedback on the assignment. It's got the articles, it's got the video clips. There's a tech tool built into this one called My Brain Shark, and there's some things that we've narrated down here. If we click in here, it shows them how to use that technology tool with their students, but it also demonstrates that they learn this way as well. So part 2 takes about 2 hours, and, oh, I don't have part 3 moved on here. There is a part 3, and it takes about 3.5 hours. And then the last part, they actually have to give effective feedback to students, and they send that to me or someone, and then they'll do that peer work back and forth. So for each of those 5 pieces of learning, that group work piece, that piece on performance assessment, this one is a long piece of learning. It'll probably take them more than 1 PD day just to do the learning. It's probably 8 or 10 hours long. Gonna get that opened up very quickly. It's spinning up there. In addition, then under this tab that's called Technology Tutorials, every piece of technology we use in this, and that was on that original PD list, there's a how-to of how to use that technology, and then extensions of the technology. So you've used it in this assignment, but here are other places or other ways that you can use it. When will they do this? We are hoping that they will see that we're encouraging them to continue to work in their PLC groups, their professional learning communities that were established last year. So let's say all of us were in a professional learning community. We've got those 5 areas that we have to learn in this year. We don't care where they start. But sometime through the year, all of those learnings have to be completed. The implementations 5 times each, the peer feedbacks. And honestly, if that was done in your PLC, you're probably more familiar with and know the people in your PLC, and you'll probably get somebody who's not in your content area, which would be just fine. That's okay, because then they don't criticize the math if I'm teaching a math lesson, they're really looking for the strategy instruction. And so it's open in terms of how you schedule this and how you do it, but it's all gotta be done. And the Google Docs are on line 4, our PLC group, so other PLCs don't have to see that, but I have access to it, your principal has access to it, and if we don't see you moving along with implementation, we'll just be chirping at you about, you know what, this is the 3rd PD a day, and we've seen no implementation logged on here. Where are you, what's going on? But the idea is not to have to be after them, but to just be able to answer their questions and support them. It's a lot of work. It's a huge ramp up in expectation. But you know what? When teachers are effective at some of these things as well as 2 or 3 more years worth of things, it really changes what happens in the classroom. And we really have to have our community feel confident that as a result of X day, something has happened and we're gonna see something different happen in the classroom as a result of it. Rather than, we had the PD day and I still see the teacher opening the book and doing worksheets, or I still see the teacher lecturing all day. You know, it's got to look different. And it has to look different because our kids need to graduate from here with different skills and strategies that they're capable with. So this is the plan. The weekly will be about 2/3 of the way completed when they start PD. So if effective group work or productive group work, if that learning isn't ready, we just say, you're gonna have to choose one of the other 4 areas. We'll stay ahead of them because we're 2/3 or 3/4 of the way finished with putting this piece together. I honestly don't know, I'm probably way naive, but I honestly don't think we're gonna get a ton of pushback on this. In addition to this, they're all writing concept-based units, and every teacher needs to add 2 more units that are written, that are concept-based units. All of these strategies then have to be built into those units that they write, and we're looking for them. They turn their units into us so we can see them, and we coach them and give feedback. So it really puts a lot of collaborative time together, but it's collaborative time really pushing for that professional development learning. Questions?
That's very interesting.
We'll give you a report after the first couple PD
Yeah,
days and see how it goes. I really think Denny and Kevin and I have spent a lot of time talking. We've kind of rolled this out in front of a few of the teachers. We showed it to the math teachers tonight because we pulled them out of the AEA math work and put them back in here, and they're like, this is what we want to do. This is the work we need to be doing. And those teachers said, we need to be doing math work and math projects with the English Language Arts Department and the Science Department. This shouldn't just be math out of the math book and math book only. We need them to see where you use math.
Yeah.
So-
Anybody can add 2 + 2.
Yeah.
So this PD will get us to the rigorous curriculum that we need to get to.
Well, it's going to start that process, yes. And this will be a ramp up. This isn't a
No.
it's not a 1-year deal.
No, this is a 3 to 5 year,
Yes,
maybe
yeah.
closer to 5 year deal.
We'll have
The
made
way
a
it looks
huge
to
step
me.
in 3 years with this.
Yeah.
So then if we go back to that original plan, that spreadsheet that I was showing you, shoot. Right here. One thing about having all of this learning on that weekly is a new teacher comes to our district and we have a place where the learning is. Because before, when it's been, we stand up and deliver to them, then how do you give that to new people? How do you give it to people who missed that day of school? And so the Weebly has huge contributions to make to this process, just in terms of the resources are there then. There's probably a couple of these 5 that we will continue next year for part 2 of them, and then we'll introduce some additional topics. This literacy strategies and the content in the ELA classrooms. There's a whole set of Iowa core standards that we're to be implementing. Literacy in the science classroom, literacy in the social studies classroom, literacy in all the CTE classrooms. So this will be hard. for teachers to do, because the industrial technology teacher, Eric, he doesn't know how to teach reading in the content area. He studied to be an industrial technology teacher, but there are standards for him related to reading and writing. So we use one of our ELA teachers in particular, and she'll be doing some work with these content teachers, developing strategies, then actually working directly with them one-on-one on here's what you would do in the classroom, here's what you'll say, here's what the product should look like, here's the rubric to score it, I'll score it with you. I was telling her that as a person who taught science or family and consumer science, I'd have been very willing to do that, but I would have needed help. Because especially in writing, it's been fine, I can assign some writing, but I really need some help knowing exactly where students are with it and what's better writing than other pieces of writing. So we'll report to you as we get into a month or so of this and just let you know. They aren't all gonna quit over it by any means. There'll be a few that will very much welcome this. There'll be a few that'll go, oh my gosh. And then there'll be that wide range on the in-between.
Right.
But every kid has a computer in their hand. We're a watch school at the middle school. We're not off the list yet. Watch school at the high school. We're not off the list in middle school. We just have to get our act together here. So this will be a good start for
It's
us.
just like anything, when you start something like this, it looks overwhelming. But once you get into it and you get that routine, I think it'll be much easier.
It's modeled a little bit, especially the implementation after what we used as a reading first school in Wall Lake when I first came back to Wall Lake through Auburn. And it was a huge learning curve, lots of hours of professional development and lots of implementation studies. But you know what? Reading achievement rates. So this will be the new piece, this implementing right here. And then having someone check to see that you've implemented.
Yeah.
So, but, well, it'll be okay. We'll get through it. So those are the PD plans. I'm not gonna have you approve them, because they're all not, like, every I dotted and T crossed on them. But we will have you approve them probably at the next meeting, but you'll know kind of what's coming now, so. Anybody else have any questions?
Have we ever approved PD? Did we do that
I don't recall.
before? I don't recall, huh?
Other than the days when
Well,
there's
that's,
nothing
I
happening.
don't.
I would like you to,
No, that's fine, I mean, I'm
and
just.
I should explain to you why I'd like you to. I think that,
So you blame us.
no,
Understand that completely. It's not hard to
No,
understand.
not to blame.
Hey, you two need to quarrel outside of the.
It's the implementation piece of it, so that there's, you know what, the board approved this. So we've got 5 implementations, 2 of them you need peer feedback, 1 of them your principal needs. I mean, I just think that when things are board approved, they have a little different, it's elevated to a little different status, and that's probably where we need to be, so. And then we'll blame the board.
They have an unlisted phone
And
number.
then,
Oh, but they'll find you.
Oh, yeah, no.
And maybe you'll want to listen to them, I know.
Right.
okay, can we move on? Discuss and/or approve teacher leadership and compensation grant. This is something that we talked about a little bit about at the last meeting. right?
Yes, and on the 13th, Tammy Vine, Melissa Salgado, and Carrie Mailer went with me to a full-day training. Sarah Voiles and, I shouldn't have started saying names, and Gretchen Hofling are the other 2 teachers that are on the planning group. That doesn't mean that they've applied for teacher leadership money or that they've been anything. It just means they're on the team of people that will be helping to write the grant. We started training at 9, and about 11 o'clock that morning, I was looking at them and honestly said, are we gonna try for this year or not? And they looked at me and they're like, yes, we are. Okay, it's way more daunting
Intense.
than I thought it would be. This is legislated, so every school in Iowa will have a teacher leadership and compensation program, or plan, I shouldn't say program, a plan. During the 15-16 will be the last year that the last third of the schools will get on. What happens this year is that we can write this year, and if we're awarded the grant, we can choose to implement yet this year, or we can implement the following year. If we write this year and we don't get the grant, we write again next year because everybody has to apply that hasn't applied before. Sort of like the preschool grant. You know, they went through those years of funding and application, then the last year, everyone had to apply, and you had to meet the criteria. If we apply this year and we don't get it, we can keep the parts of the grant that do meet the requirements, meet the totals expected, the scores, and then just edit next year. So we're gonna try, absolutely, we've decided we're trying for the grant. We learned about the first 5 parts of the grant, and we're actually gonna start writing here in the next couple weeks on those first 5 parts. The grant does not take board approval, which I did not know. This can be the actions of a group of teachers who decide to take this and move with it. Most schools have administration and teachers. We will share what the grant is gonna look like before we send it in so that you know what the plan looks like. But it's a school reform measure in the state of Iowa. So if you didn't receive high enough score last year to be funded, when we went to the training, about half the schools that were there were schools that were trying again this year. They were keeping the parts that scored high and they were adding to that. The good part is it's far more open than anything I've ever experienced with the DE. All the grants that were awarded last year are available to us. They've even highlighted the ones that are the very best of the best. They've got a small school set and they've got a large school set. A third of the students in Iowa are what they're looking at this year. So it's whatever number of schools it takes to reach another third of the students. Last year, all of the big schools got grants except for Des Moines Public Schools and Iowa City. If Des Moines Public Schools applies this year and gets it, they'll take 25% of that 1/3, but that still leaves tons of small schools to get them. They think there might be 100 schools this year that are awarded grants. They were very clear about what caused schools last year not to be successful. They've noted changes, some edits that they've made, and
So they're really trying to help.
I felt like they were really trying to help us. The AEA hired a person that's used to work for the DE, and she's going to every AEA and doing trainings like this. And her goal is, you know what, my goal is that you all reach the funding this year. The DE had a rep there all day long answering questions, and he was very decent and helpful. We feel like we know people we can call for help, we know who we can get to help us edit, and we have a lot of grants to look at. So it's a 33.5 base pay, and then you choose a plan that the district wants, and it can be for a teacher to be out of their classroom 50% of the time, 20% of the time, or remain full-time in their classroom but have outside assigned kinds of duties. Or it could be that I sign up for, I'm only what's called a demo teacher. I teach well enough that what happens is that teachers come in and watch me and I demonstrate to them in my classroom what strategies or what some of those list of pedagogical strategies are up there. So there's lots of ways to do that, but even though I'm a demo teacher, I get some additional pay for that. There's curriculum work, PD work, and the district can write really whatever they want.
And that's where the grant comes from, right, is to give the teachers
Yes.
increased pay?
Here's a good example. We have 2 grandkids in the Johnston School District, and one of them is a 3rd grader, and one of her homeroom teacher has a 25% teacher leadership position. So 25% of the time, Maddie's teacher walks out of the classroom, and a teacher walks in who teaches only math all day in 3rd grade in that building, because she moves to teach from this person who's out 25% of the time. When the schools that were there that have written the grant but didn't get the grant, all of them had board approval, so.
Well, I don't know if that's the case.
I found that very interesting as well. In fact, several of the new schools that were there asked the question about the rationale, and you're sure, and the DE's like, no, and so that was very clear in the legislation, so. So we're in the process, we'll let you know when we get further. Any other questions that you have?
think so. I don't have any questions, do you guys? Okay, so let's move on then to C, discuss and or approve long-range achievement goals.
These goals were set, I believe it was a year ago, and these are our local district long-range achievement goals. They're part of the school improvement plan that's rewritten every 5 years in a school. And these really do need to be approved by the board. I haven't changed the wording. I think that the wording needs to stay the same as they were when they were originally written. If you ask me questions about them, I'm not gonna be of much help to you.
Yeah, my
Other
first
than-
question is, what does high level mean?
Yeah, well, we do too, but then in a way, maybe that's okay to be like that. Reading, math, and science have always been areas that we've had long-range goals in our school improvement plans, but social studies and 21st century skills have been added. 21st century skills in Iowa are health literacy, technology literacy, employability, civic literacy, and financial literacy. There are 5 sets of standards in those 5 categories or areas. Civic literacy is actually part of social studies, as you would imagine. When our teachers write these units, they build in Iowa core standards, content standards, and they build in these literacies as well into those units. So the new areas are social studies and 21st century skills, and what this says now is we have to measure and report in those areas now, and that's new. But I would recommend that you approve these long-range goals, and then in another month, we'll probably bring you our annual goals.
Yeah, I like that. So I'd take a motion to approve the goals as
So,
recommended.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the long-range achievement goals as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passed. Okay, move on to D, discuss and or approve Opera Iowa contract.
Dr. Feeney and Bill Colby had worked together to, I'll say, acquire Opera Iowa. It's sometimes not easy to schedule them to come to a district or to a community. So Opera Iowa will be coming on February 9th and spend the full day in the ESAC County School District. The Sac City Fine Arts and the Music Boosters in ESAC County are working in conjunction to host them. There'll be a performance in the elementary for both elementary buildings. There'll be more during the morning that they're here. They'll be in the high school working with some high school vocal music students doing a workshop. And then there's a performance in the evening at the auditorium at the middle school for the community. Cinderella is one of the performances. And see if I can find it very quickly. Billy Goat's Gruff is the elementary student performance, and then I believe it's Cinderella is the evening
They're
performance.
gonna go to both elementaries, is that right?
No, the elementary students will be in one location
Okay.
for them to do it. And those groups will pay everything except $500 to $750, somewhere in that range. It's about a $2,100 or $2,200 price tag on the whole package. So what we'll do, because the contract is made out to us, is we'll pay for it, and then those 2 groups will reimburse us for the amounts that they've agreed to.
So, we need to approve that contract. Anybody have any questions other than what Barb's given us? I think it's a great thing for our kids.
It's a great performance. It's a really fun day for,
Did you
And-
say
and
they
a
work with
learning
high school kids?
yes, they do. There's something called each part of it has you pay for each part. So the performance to elementary kids has a fee. The performance at night has a fee. And then it's called a workshop that they do with high school students. So I don't know if our new high school music teacher, I don't even know if she knows that they're coming, but they are. So we'll let her know that.
So I'd take a motion to approve the contract.
So moved.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to approve the Opera Iowa contract. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Okay, we'll move on to personnel resignations, none?
No.
Are there any? No? Okay. And contracts.
We have a list of contracts that John gave you.
The first 6 are Schedule B contracts, and the last 4 are associate contracts. The 3 in the middle school are all with the student, and I believe the elementary one, Mike, is with the first grade. That's what we talked about earlier.
So I'd take a motion to approve the contracts as presented here. We don't have to go through each one.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to approve the contracts as presented. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passed 3-0.
We have one Schedule B that's not filled yet, and that's our assistant varsity basketball, boys basketball position.
Okay, we're gonna discuss future agenda items and set date. So the teacher leadership compensation grant will not be on the agenda, right? Or do we?
Probably just an update of where we're at with it.
Okay.
Brent to feel like he has control, so
I'd like to move on.
we can do that.
There you go. Doesn't have to be next month, but.
We could, it won't be ready then. We can do that at our October board meeting. So we can give you an update next month about where we're at with it.
Okay.
We would have had professional development day, at least one by then, at all the buildings, so we'll be able to give a report about that.
Quick. Yeah, with the due date of October 31st, the October meeting would fall on the 20th if we go regular time, so something to shoot for anyhow.
What's the September?
The
meeting?
September date would be the 15th,
15th.
but Mrs. Rudolph will be out of state. So,
Wondering if we could do it on the 22nd or the 23rd. 22nd will be a council meeting for
The
you.
council meeting, they start at 7, so.
22nd is a Tuesday. Oh, no. 15.
you're getting ahead of yourself.
actually, now that I've looked, the 23rd is tough for me. I'd rather try and get it in on Monday. We could, the 22nd.
Well, it's worked before, as long as we don't take too long. That'll be in Lakeview, so I'll have time to get to Wall Lake. But we better start it at 5 or 5:30 for sure.
Is that all right, Brent? Lisa?
Sure.
Doesn't matter which of those, 5 or 5:30.
Oh, we better go at 5 to make.
Yeah,
I think we probably should, yeah.
Okay.
September 22nd, 5, at the high school.
We'll have several, I guess I would call them consent or annual kinds of things that happen at that board meeting, like our depositories and our, I forget the list. No, they
No,
don't.
typically we put those in consent agenda.
It's just- yeah.
the annual meeting one.
Yep.
Good, that way Brent can be the president now.
I'll let you guys fight that one out. Yeah,
That was our deal, right? No?
Okay, so Monday, September 22nd at 5. That like. Okay.
We won't have a leadership grant yet, so the only thing left over from tonight might be another PD report.
It would probably just be under superintendent report
Yeah.
rather than action items, so.
No old business again.
We're doing good. Okay, so, I guess, Brent, you're up.
Second.
I say